think very carefully about how you might do that. Public cloud has part of this picture. At the moment, there are no firm plans to use public cloud because of not so much security, but reputational risk of government information and government services being provided publicly. But there's nothing to stop them being done in due course. And desktop is also part of this process. A standard desktop within government will give you the portal access, and the portal, the application store, gives you the chance to find, purchase, perhaps gain knowledge of or promote a service to your colleagues. None of this is particularly revolutionary in the big wide world of computing, but think of service catalogs, dynamic provisioning, and the ability to use some form of web interface to get at them. The sorts of services we see offered, plan to offer managed services, ERP systems, email and CRM, for example, could be offered that way. Common government assets, which is systems used within government and only within government. Things like government bank, for example, might be an interesting one there. Utility services, tools that everyone uses in their job, and then some custom services that might require some extra help to build databases of information and so on. Utility services and information actually go together quite well, and there's a lot of enthusiasm for that in this, this model looking forwards. The next slide's on trusted brand. The idea of G-Cloud will be more than just a technology concept, but actually be a brand and, if you like, something that you have to comply with, but then you can promote your services throughout government. So there's a desire to make sure cost savings are realized across the board. So if you buy a service in from someone that complies with the brand requirements, everyone gets the best price across government, or maybe there are options of doing something cheaper. As a citizen paying taxes, I'm delighted with the idea that we should be doing such things, and it will put the suppliers on their mettle to continue to deliver good value for money. And I talked a little bit about service categories just now. There's nothing particularly different there. So G-Cloud is about a brand. G-Cloud's about making sure that we get best value for money and the flexibility across government to get the job done more efficiently, sharing resources and sharing services and so on. The next piece of the puzzle is the infrastructure consolidation. I don't propose to talk much about this other than, there's perhaps an order of magnitude reduction in number of facilities required. Government has tens of thousands of servers, but actually in the scale of 1 million server data centers which are beginning to emerge, I mean, it's a corner of the data center that you're talking about. And so there are ways that the infrastructure could be consolidated that would be extremely efficient. There are also, though, laws and requirements on some of the data that mean it's impossible to do quite that. But nevertheless, the team is looking at the wide range of options. There are, like any big organization, there's a large range of legacy systems lying around as well, not all of whom can be resolved to x86 servers. So there's some challenges in here to make this work, but this is being worked on very effectively right now. I'll just talk a little bit about the application store, which was the thing I was most involved with. The application store was very interesting. I first came across the idea in looking at the government service requirements, but talked to colleagues from industry, and at this point it's worth pointing out that G-Cloud is an initiative shared between industry and government. It's not just about government IT coming up with new answers. It's very much about the industry bringing new ideas in and sharing them with government and agreeing where perhaps the options might be presented. And there were about 100 volunteers gave their time for free to work with government on this. It was a big project. But in the area of requirements for application store, we saw rich potential for shared service catalogs, that is, services that could be used across departments or widely within departments, being made available dynamically through a web browser, allowing you to say, yes, I want this service, please, having it dynamically provisioned, having checked that you're entitled to it and that there's money in the budget to pay for it, and providing that very much more tick list sort of or a checkbox model of the world where you just assemble all the things you need to get your job done, including perhaps access to information that help you do your job better. Things like the Ordnance Survey mapping information as a service already available in the UK as a whole, using that perhaps to provide maps of the local areas and putting street lamps on them and giving citizens the ability to click on a street map saying this is street lamp to say this is broken, and spawning a workflow to schedule it being fixed is the sort of thought process. That sort of joined together service, of course, at the moment is a little bit of a dream for a lot of us. The two examples I can give you of where that actually works today, in my experience, is in road tax renewal for your car, which is online and works very smoothly. And also, if you've got a new passport, you can also get a new driving license using the same picture and signature on the back of that, and that's quite useful too. But rather than having those examples being the exception, we'd like many more examples to be the rule. So application store, a big piece of this puzzle. I've seen in certain government departments, I've seen a rich opportunity for a dynamic application store, which you can buy off the shelf actually, to be implemented on top of a rich set of services and providing that provisioning there and then. So this is extremely viable as a way forward, I think. The final piece of this puzzle is the governance model. With government data, clearly you cannot allow it to be shipped anywhere, and you have to make sure, for example, medical records stay in the UK. You have to make sure in general that records stay within Europe, which means using a US-based internet service provider is probably not very viable, particularly if they have replicas around the world. And you've already seen the big suppliers finding ways to assure you that they can operate in safe harbor bases within the European Union. That you'll see much more of that, but you'll also see all sorts of other service providers emerge. And today we launched the Cloud Industry Forum in the industry as a way of perhaps making sure you understand which suppliers, where suppliers are based, who they are, and how you might do business with them. But for government, you have to go another level beyond that to look at what does it take to allow a service to be used on government premises, accessing and filtering government data. There's some measure of assurance required there, and again I've seen in government departments the processes required for this, so there has to be some form of governance model. There was one established or being established for the public sector network, and the thought process is to leverage this and have control over it from the Government CIO Council. So an important step. Information assurance is a big issue here. That is, the senior manager in any government department has to assure that the use of that data is secure and will meet the standards required, and information assurance is the process for which that happens. There has to be that level of regulation. But there will be parts of the G-Cloud as we move forwards that will give you access, more open access to services, so that there's a little less security there. Couldn't be used for secure applications, but could be used more generally to get work done. There are opportunities for all in this. I mean, the idea very much is creating an open space as part of this picture that will allow SMEs to be involved, publishing services perhaps from the local area into government, allow people to do the job once these standards are all agreed, understood, once the regulatory processes are in place. And of course, if you can offer a service at a good price, then why wouldn't government be interested? And so I think as a taxpayer, I think we're all interested, everyone's a taxpayer, and everyone's interested in making sure that we get better value for money. So creating an open market, getting the right prices for the products, creating the same sort of effect that the application stores are creating in the various mobile platforms today. As long as they're not for trivial purposes, getting the right services done for the right reasons makes a lot of sense. So, and just to wrap up, really, this is work in progress. This is where we've got to. We have a good strategy. Right now, the coalition government's committed to making savings in ICT, which means there will not be a large G-Cloud project with a large G-Cloud budget. The strategy is being implemented by discussions at the supply level on how to increase flexibility and perhaps reduce the amount of cost. There are discussions around prioritization to make sure that we can get some early successes and use those to promote the idea of adoption more widely, and looking more actively at exploring sharing of services across government. As I said, SMEs are an important part of the picture, but there are many challenges lying in the way government procurement is currently structured. It tends to favour large-scale suppliers. Downstream like to level that playing field a bit. Standards for G-Cloud services so that you understand what the hurdle is in order to be able to market your service into government, and the assurance processes to make sure that new services, when they're introduced, are in fact exactly what they say they are. As they say, beware of Greeks bearing gifts. So these are all being worked on. Once the CSR is through and we get into late autumn, early winter, then more of the progress in this area will be made clear. But there are two people responsible for G-Cloud at the Cabinet Office, Chris Chance and Andy Tate, both part of the CIO community, reporting to John Suffolk. And these people are leading the charge. So the graphics on the right show that we have a coalition government, more or less exactly in line with where we were before, but with a distinct requirement to save money. And the Sir Humphreys of this world are beginning to look at the challenge of perhaps sharing services in a real way, actually giving up control of some services in order to use services from other parts of government. I have to say a lot of that's made much more difficult by the law that they have to comply with. Anyway, so that's my pitch today. I hope you find it useful as an introduction. There's much more water yet to go under the bridge, but it's been exciting so far, and I think we'll just pause there for questions.
Thank you very much, Ian. The floor is open now for questions. If you have any questions, just click the raise hand button and we will unmute you so that you can ask your question. Okay, I see one hand raised. Just a minute. Steve Cohey. So I'm unmuting Steve now. Yes, go ahead, Steve.
Hi. So, in this the App Store, I understand the idea of suppliers delivering applications to be purchased within the public sector. Is there also an idea here of an internal market being created so that departments can create applications that access their services and data and then generate revenue? Is that part of the model?
I don't think generating, hello Steve, I don't think generating revenue is part of that model, to be honest. There is obviously the idea of sharing best practice, where someone has developed an application that could be used somewhere else. I mean, that would be an excellent way of sharing knowledge. I have to say that's not a natural behavior in any organization, by the way. But no, I think for the moment the interest is on creating an open market for new and good ideas to be brought into government computing, and I guess let them live or die depending on how popular they become. So the application store does include the ability to promote these ideas, these tools. And the power of one idea in here is that any civil servant who has a problem to solve can basically ask if there's a solution already available and perhaps simulate the thought in someone else's mind. But being realistic about it, I suspect mostly what will happen is they'll find other tools and find good uses for them and just let people know that they found this useful through some sort of rating system.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, any other questions? Yeah, I see two hands raised. Okay, Dennis. Go ahead, Dennis.
Yeah, thanks, Ian. I enjoyed your talk. Just on the sort of elephant in the room, though, on the building of the national infrastructure. Difficult to dance around that. None of this will remain a pipe dream, a cloud in the sky. If we don't have something that approaches a national infrastructure, that's very reminiscent, isn't it, of the early days of the for electricity 100 years ago. Just a bit more on that, whether that it does represent a true vacuum that the private sector could look to, whether there's any political appetite for a private PFI type structure to build that infrastructure, or is it just back of some huge great government cuts Q agenda at the moment?
That's a really good question, actually, and I can't give you a really good answer, I'm afraid. I think my observation would be wherever I go in the world, I find people with a huge amount of compute capacity available, and sometimes even the networking ability to link it together. I suspect the way this will move forward will be through a federation of the existing facilities and with a selective introduction of services in a relatively small way. I don't think there's any appetite at all, politically or anywhere else, even if there was any money, to invest in a national infrastructure that would supplement what we already have. But I will turn it the other way around and say I think we're spending enough money that we with this, we could probably find great areas of improvement, reduction of energy costs through more modern infrastructures, and creates a premium there. But I haven't heard any discussion at all of a PFI type approach to building a replacement infrastructure, nor is, I believe, the same conversation going on in the public sector network area either. So I think everyone's beginning to think about, well, what have we got? What can we do with what we have? And I don't mean this in a